Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. I have a fabulous industry guest for you this week. I have for you esteemed cinematographer Jeremy Benning. Now, what is a cinematographer, you may ask? I also asked this question. It is literally one of the first questions that I ask poor Jeremy. I don't know about you, but I love asking smart people like him really dumb questions like that because I didn't know what a cinematographer was. When I first walked onto a set, I had no clue who anybody was in the crew. I didn't go to film school. I was an idiot. I had no idea. It's part of our job as actors to know these things. And how are we supposed to learn these things unless you ask? Oh my goodness. So this is what I'm loving about these industry episodes, is learning about all of these jobs on a film and television set, realizing how much incredible artistic collaboration comes with the crew side of the film and television industry, but also that collaboration with us as actors in the cast. It is so cool. And you'll notice, as you've probably seen if you've watched or even listened to a lot of these industry episodes, I get really emotional. And I don't really know why, but I get really emotional when I hear people like Jeremy talk about how much they love their craft, how much collaboration is involved, and just how much is involved, period, in creating a work of art. It's very rare, I think, in this world to have so many creative people in one space developing a work of art together. It makes me really happy that something like that exists in this world. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I love the film and television industry, because I just want to be a part of that. I just want to be in the room where it happens. Now, Jeremy has an incredible resume, and we talk about this, but he was the cinematographer on one of my favorite shows of all time. May it rest in peace, The Expanse. Oh, but his resume is just legendary. Please enjoy cinematographer, which you will soon learn what that is, cinematographer Jeremy Benning. Tell me your story. How did you become a cinematographer?
Well, my story is I guess kind of a complicated one, and I know that people all have different stories of how they become cinematographers or directors or anything in this business. In my case, I was interested in photojournalism as a kid, and I thought I was going to become a National Geographic photographer. My parents had National Geographic magazines, and I was really into that as a kid, and I thought that was a great career, and creatively I was interested in it. I got a camera when I was 11. I was delivering newspapers for the Toronto Star, and that was my way of saving up money to buy a camera. And this is pre-internet days, so the only way to learn about photography was to go to the library and get the books. So I got all the books. I read all the books I could. Even before I had the camera, I read as much as I could, any book I could get on photography. So by the time I actually got the camera, like a year or so later, after I'd saved up enough, I kind of had all these things I wanted to try and learn based on what I'd read in these books. And I did that, I guess, before I went to high school, I started to get into that. And then when it came time to go to high school, we became aware of the fact that there was an arts high school in Mississauga where I grew up called Cosser Park. And you could major in visual arts there, and they had a photography program that was just starting up. And my parents found out about it, they suggested it, and I thought, this is great, you have to audition to get in. I was also interested into drawing, so I was a decent illustrator as a kid. I was into that sort of thing, and that was pretty much what you had to get into the school with was drawing. So I got into that program, focused on photography the whole time, and then around that time, there was an aunt in our family was working. She was a nurse at Toronto General, one of the head nurses there, and she was hired as a medical consultant on a TV series, on a pilot. And she knew I was into photography and into that, and she said, "Oh, hey, do you want to come and see the behind the scenes of a pilot being shot?" And I think I was in grade 7, and I was like, "Yes, I totally want to do that." So I went downtown. My father drove me there, and I spent the whole day on this film set. I'd never been on a film set. All I'd ever seen was like the behind the scenes things on TV of movies being made, which was really interesting. I was into watching these behind the scenes things and getting a sense of like, oh, that's how they make movies. So after that day of being on set, I realized, you know what, I don't want to be a photojournalist. I think I actually want to be a cinematographer. And I realized from some watching how they worked and how the whole thing worked, I realized it was the skill set that I was already learning from being into photography, but it just translates now into motion and storytelling with editing, that kind of thing. So I made that my focus through the rest of my high school years. And everyone told me like, well, if you want to get into cinematography, you should go to Ryerson. And everyone kept giving me that advice. So I sort of made my goal at that point, like, okay, that's where I would need to go after high school. Whatever I need to do in terms of like grades and courses and things, I made that my focus. And while that was going on, I was also volunteering at the local community channel television station. So Cable 10 Mississauga you could work there as a volunteer. And I think you had to be 16. And I think I was 15 when I heard about it. So I'm like, okay, when I'm 16, I can go and volunteer. So for 3 years, like from 16 to 19, basically the latter half of high school, I was volunteering. So I'd work there like 1 or 2 nights a week on like the local news show and the Mayor's Hour with Hazel McCallion and all that stuff. And it was basically like live television and learning how to do audio for live television and switching and basically they would teach you how to do everything. So that was great, but I knew that ultimately I still wanted to be in film, but I loved the experience of working in live television just because it was a way of getting your hands into production in some way or another. So, and then from there, while I was working there was a movie theater in Mississauga that I worked at as an usher, and there was a projectionist there named George Lamaja, who was a part-time projectionist, but he was actually a DP. That was back when projectionists were IA, they were union. That changed or shortly after that. But so he was a union cinematographer. It's the same union, the same local also handled projectionists. So he, in his part-time, in his downtime, he would be the part-time projectionist at the theater. So he and I, during my shift, when it was nighttime, I would go hang out with him in the projection booth when I had all my duties were done, and we would just talk until like the last movie would come out. So I had time to kill. And he knew, based on our conversations, that I was interested in being a cinematographer. I knew what he did, so he was a great resource. And he said, hey, after about a year of that, and this was actually the year after high school finished, so between going to Ryerson, I'd gotten in, accepted. It's now the summer off after high school. And George said, hey, I'm doing this little indie like movie this summer. Do you want to work on it? I was like, of course. So I went and worked on this little indie movie as like a PA. I'd never really been on a real set other than like working at the cable station. And I didn't really know much, but I knew how to set up a light stand and carry a sandbag, and I was kind of useful as a PA. So I did that it was like a short 2-week thing, but on that little short thing, I met a guy named Ray Duma, who was a young Steadicam operator, who was just been doing it for a few years. We kind of hit it off, and sort of, by the end of that little short, he said, hey, give me your number. There's a company I work at that makes music videos, and they need people. Like, give me your number. And literally, like, the week after that, I got a phone call from someone at a company called Blackwalk Productions. And they're like, hey, can you come and work at this on a music video? And there was also a corporate production company called China Syndrome Productions, and they needed people. And Ray gave me the contact to both of these. He connected me with both. The week after, I was working as a PA at these companies, and that literally was everything that I've done up to this point started with that meeting. That meeting led to working at Blackwalk for several years. So I was working as a PA, then I was a swing, then I was an electric, then I was a best boy, then I was a gaffer. And I was doing that while I was in film school. So I was going to film school, and then I would take, if I could get the day off, I would go on a weekend or whatever during the summers and work on music videos as a technician. And then I started to get opportunities to shoot. So anything that was super tiny or micro, I was already shooting my classmates' films at Ryerson. But then the people at Blackwalk knew, and China Syndrome knew that I was interested in shooting. So they would give me little freebie jobs or little tiny things, like whatever they couldn't find someone for, they would give me the job. So that gave me a chance to kind of be honing that skill while I was also working as an electric, or so I was kind of doing a bit of everything, but trying to keep shooting. And I did that for several years, and I ended up dropping out of Ryerson. It was a 4-year program, and I decided to leave after the second year because I thought, really the program was geared towards people who want to be directors, and I knew that I wanted to be a cinematographer. And I thought, after I've gotten what I needed. I got my history and my film theory and all that from the course, and I've met my peers. I'm learning all the things I need to learn, and I'm getting all the knowledge I want about cinematography from the jobs I was working on as a PA in the music video world. So I'm like, I don't need to be in film school anymore. And it was kind of a tough decision because I was a good student in high school and I'd gotten good marks. I was an honor student. So the idea of quitting school and not finishing, I had to struggle with that. But, you know, to credit to my parents, I talked to them and they understood. They understood enough because my family's not in the film business at all. But they understood that, you know, given the kind of industry this is, you don't really need that diploma. If you want to quit, we support that. So I did. I decided to quit, and then it kind of continued from there. Because Ray was a Steadicam operator, and his business partner, they had two Steadicam rigs, and they had an old one. And he said, if you want to use our old rig, you can use it, but you got to go take a workshop. You got to take a workshop. And there was a workshop that was coming up. The year that I was going to be going into my third year at Ryerson, there was a workshop that was going to be in New York in September. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go back and try it third year, see if I want to stay. And this is after working a whole summer of like crazy music videos. So now this is my like second summer of like working my ass off as a PA in music videos. And I'm like, do I want to go back to the film school? So I went back in September, and there was a period of a week where you could drop out and still get your money back. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try a week. So I did the week, and I'm like, I can't do a year of this. I don't see it working. That's when I found out about the Steadicam workshop. So I dropped out from Ryerson, got the money back, and that tuition was basically what it cost for the week-long Steadicam course. So I went to upstate New York, took that course, and a guy named Larry McConkey taught the course. And I didn't know who it was at the time because the internet wasn't really much of a thing yet with terms of IMDb. But I was later realizing that this is the guy who did Goodfellas and the first Mission Impossible. And so he was, you know, huge. Like there's Garrett Brown, the inventor, and then there's Larry. And Larry taught this course. And that course, that was so inspiring. I left that course after like 5 days with him. And there's like 15 of us in this like resort in upstate New York. And he walked us through all these amazing shots that he had done. He showed us his rehearsal, he would record the takes, and he would show us the rehearsals and the outtakes, and he'd explain how he choreographed like the Goodfellas shot and the Raising Cane's shot and all these seminal Steadicam shots. And it was a technical course, yes, but it was also a masterclass in choreography, how to work with actors, how to block, how do you work with background. And I realized that a lot of these amazing shots, it's all him. He's working with Scorsese and you know the cast. But ultimately, all the amazing transitions of what happens in these long takes, that's Larry's doing his magic. So I left that course thinking, you know, it's like taking guitar lessons for a week and then leaving and say, okay, I'm going to be a professional guitar player. Then you have to now go and practice for years, right? But I thought, okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to be good at this. But even if I'm not, the course was totally worth it because I got this knowledge from Larry that I still to this day use. There's still little things that are ingrained in me of how to choreograph camera movement with cast, with background, with action that I learned from that course. So I left that and I went back to Toronto and I started doing Steadicam on any little thing I could get. Ray would basically send me any little job that he couldn't do or whatever. So I was working for free on things and micro budget things, whatever. But I did that for a few years to the point where I actually got really good at it. But I got into Steadicam thinking, as a wannabe cinematographer, that knowing Steadicam would be a great tool to have as a cinematographer. And it was, because I was known as a DP when I started building my career doing bigger music videos and like commercials and things, that people knew that I was a DP who could also do Steadicam. Because at this time, this would have been the late 90s, early 2000s. This was before like gimbals and those kinds of things. If you wanted to do that kind of shot, you had to have a Steadicam operator. So I was known as, if you didn't, smaller budget thing, you could hire me, I could shoot your commercial, whatever, and I could do Steadicam. If it was a Steadicam intensive thing. And that actually was a great foothold for me into building my career as a DP. But I also worked for other DPs in commercials as a Steadicam operator for other people. And what ended up happening was I got so good at it just from doing it that I became known as a Steadicam operator. So it kind of got to a point where I'm like, okay, I kind of have to, and then I bought my own rig around that time. But at least before that, I need to get my own stuff because I was so busy that it was harder to share the rig with Ray, and that was understood. Like we worked that out, and so I got my own rig, and then for the next, basically from like 99 to like 2008, I did that pretty heavily. And then around 2008, I kind of retired from it because it got to the point where people were thinking of me as just that. So I left it, and here I am today. Like kind of everything after that, everything happened after that as far as my DP career was the focus, and I just focused on shooting. But, the Steadicam background is something that, starting with Larry and also with Ray, like Ray taught me a lot of great things from his techniques, because Ray was also an excellent Steadicam operator. He was known as like one of the number one music video commercial guys in Toronto. So I to this day I still use that in terms of like designing lighting and working with actors and camera blocking. It's been an amazing resource. I do miss it sometimes, but I felt like I really got something out of it. But that's really what got me to where I am today. In a very long way of saying it, but that's the path.
Like, I love asking smart people like yourself dumb questions.
There's no dumb questions.
Well, I know this is. I agree. First off, can you please tell me the difference? And then I want to dive deep into your story. DP versus cinematographer.
Yes.
What is the difference? Are they the same?
It's the same thing. I think the word director of photography, I mean, in Canada we say DOP, in the States they say DP. I think that term gets used more on bigger feature level stuff where it's like you are the director of the department. It's kind of the connotation of a big department. Cinematographer can be used for anything smaller than that. Because typically if you look at a feature film's credits, they list the cinematographer as the director of photography. You look at the credits for a commercial, it might say cinematographer, because it's a smaller thing. Not always, but it's a very loose rule of thumb. But I see that, I mean, I consider myself a cinematographer. I call myself a cinematographer, but I'm credited as a director of photography on the shows that I do. So I don't know how that split happened over time, but that's kind of how it is. It seems like an industry thing now.
Yeah. And do you find, do most cinematographers do what you did career trajectory wise? Do you have to start at learning all about sets, being the best boy, being the PA, and then working your way up? Or do some people just go, blammo, I'm going right into DP work? There's so many different ways. I mean, as much as there's different ways of people getting into different other departments, but with DP, I know people that were grips that worked their way up into it, people that were gaffers, focus pullers. Focus pullers sometimes become operators, and then operators become DPs, because there's also the union and the non-union way, right? If you're in the union, because I wasn't in the union, I didn't join IATSE until 99. In the beginning, I had so much work and things going on with the non-union world, which was commercials and music videos and documentaries, that I didn't have any interest in joining the union. I would occasionally get permit work as a daily Steadicam operator on TV shows and things. I got a taste of it, and I'm like, I kind of like what I'm doing in the indie world. So I really had no interest in pursuing the union world. But in the union world, that's how their system works. You join as a trainee, you become a second assistant camera, then you become a first, and then it might take years, and then you become an operator, and then it might take years, and then you become a DP. Some people have fast tracked that, but in the beginning, at least at this point in time in that era, it was a much longer trajectory. It might take you 15 years or so to go from the bottom position to becoming a DP. And I felt like, well, I'm already shooting. I'm doing things in the indie world. Why would I join the union and then suddenly have to like slow way down? So I just sort of chose to not do it that route. But I know people who've done it both ways. I mean, it really depends on the timing of when you got into the business, who the opportunities that, it's that whole luck and timing thing that you would dictate that path, whether you go the sort of more formal union route or the indie way. And even to this day, there's people who are doing it both ways. There's lots of both ways of doing it. And it's so interesting, I think, when I talk to a lot of industry people, I mean, my main goal for these episodes is, you know, the vast majority of people who are listening to this show are coming into acting later on in life without a theater or film school background. So their first
Right.
experience is on a set. They're like, who is a what now? Like,
Sure.
I don't know. And what I'm learning from a lot of the people on the industry side of things that I think people in the acting world just don't want to think about because it seems too hard is how important it is to build a foundation and work up, for lack
Yes.
of a better way. And it makes sense for me in like my medical career because that's how medical training works. But also so much in this industry is, and your story is a perfect example about these meetings of people who have said, hey, I like you. You're a decent human being and really talented. You should do this. You should try out that. And so it's not just foundation, but it's also, I hate to say it, like who you know, for better or
Right.
for worse, but
It
mostly
is.
for better, right?
It is. I mean, I think I learned early on, and actually I think Ray gave me this advice that it was kind of like, I wasn't super social in the sense of like, I wasn't like the kind of person who would go out every Friday night to the bar with everybody. I mean, I enjoyed that, but I wasn't that. But the people, I was in that circle of music videos where there was certainly, this is Toronto in the 90s. I mean, there was certainly that thing. And the advice that I got from Ray was like, if you want to work with people, you got to go drinking with them. It was that sort of thing of like, you got to be social, you got to be networking. I mean, even the social stuff is kind of networking in a way. And I realized that because it wasn't something it wasn't my natural kind of disposition. But over time, I've learned that there is that element of it because, you're going to be spending 12, 14 hours a day with someone on a film set. You need to know that you're going to enjoy each other's company and you have a rapport, and the only way you can do that is either by working with that person or you get to know them outside of a set. And you know that, okay, I like your work. I like you as a person. I think we can come together and make something cool, spending hours and hours together on a film set. So I think it's a very important part of it that you have to kind of nurture that. You have to keep nurturing those relationships.
So such a parallel. It actors work with the same director.
Yes. It's a trust factor. It's a trust factor.
They keep working with the same people who are decent and
Yes.
they like working with them. It just makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have done a lot of incredible work in your career. A lot of the TV shows we've binged, and especially the Toronto-based ones in film. Do cinematographers usually specialize? Do they go, oh, I'd want to work in drama, I want to work in comedy, I work TV, episodic, documentary, sci-fi? Or do you usually go, oh, I want to work with such and such director? How does that work? How do you pick?
I think it's sometimes you choose the path you want to stay in. Like for me, in the beginning with the indie stuff, music videos, I chose to focus on that when I could have. Other people I knew at that time were like, I want to go into long format, and they made a hard choice to like move to LA or something or pursue episodic television, and they made that their path. I wasn't interested in that, so I stayed at the beginning. I stayed in the kind of commercial music video scene, but then it's sort of by natural osmosis, I fell into the long format world, and like Expanse was an example of that. The Expanse, I wasn't pursuing long format television. It was kind of a bit of happenstance in the sense that was around the time that House of Cards came out. And I remember seeing House of Cards and thinking, oh, this is the first time I've seen episodic television where it felt like a movie that was being told over a big arc. And then I thought that would be really great to work on something like that. That was the first time I actually was interested in episodic television. It made me rethink it. And then it was shortly after that I got a call about The Expanse. I didn't pursue it. It was a phone call. Someone had mentioned my name, that I might be a good choice, and this show was looking for someone that kind of matched the description of the skill sets that I had. And it's funny because I'd never done sci-fi before. But it was my documentary background and my Steadicam and commercial background that the producing director and one of the producers saw that I could be a good fit for the show because they were looking for someone who had that skill set that the typical TV DPs at the time, they didn't have that. So they were looking for something that didn't exist in the television world, and I ticked those boxes at the time. But then after doing The Expanse for a few seasons, I'd never done it before. But then I started getting calls for like, oh, you're the sci-fi guy. started getting thought of as, and I'd never done it before, and it wasn't like I chose to go into that show. I didn't choose. I mean, I like sci-fi before that. A lot of sci-fi movies I really enjoyed, but it wasn't like I sought The Expanse out, or I'm like, I want to do sci-fi. I'm going to find a sci-fi show. It happened by happenstance in my skill set that they found me. But then after a few seasons of that, I started getting typecast in a way of like, and that happens with a lot of DPs. Like people do comedy, they're like, oh, you want to go do like a nice historic period drama. They look at you, like, you're kind of more of a comedy person, and that's a thing that comes up where it's like you get typecast into certain things, so. Then you have to make an active choice to find other things. So when in between seasons of Expanse, I would actively choose different work to basically like try and do projects that were not sci-fi in between to kind of make sure that I was defying that typecasting. So that if I'm going to do, because I did 6 seasons of that show, and if I didn't do other things in between, I would leave that show and have nothing but sci-fi on my reel and on my credit list. So I had to actively choose things that were not sci-fi in between seasons. Like I did that Long Road Home, which was like a war drama. The Boys. These are examples. These were not sci-fi shows at all. So that, I had to actively pursue those things and make sure that the world knew that I was interested.
Yeah. Like you doing something and you choosing something. You haven't. Do things just show up in your inbox? Like how do you get work? That's such a dumb question.
Well, no, I mean it's a combination of agent. Yes, I mean I've had. Yeah. I mean, my agent has been great for years, okay. And that's a part of it, and also just word of mouth and kind of you start getting asked about certain things, and then you're basically my name kind of got out into that scene because of Expanse. People in the episodic world, because I was new to that world at that time, so I was like a new face in that scene, and then I started getting I would hear about projects, it would get mentioned. Then if I saw that like, hey, I want to do that, that's interesting to me, I would make an effort to like really seek out, make sure I got an interview or a meeting with those people, and really try and like, I'm interested. I really am interested in this project because I genuinely, in our work, you're committing to something for 6 or 7 months of your life, right? And the only way that the amount of creative energy that you have to put into it, from being on set for all the hours plus all the prep time, it's a huge creative energy injection. You have to really believe in the project. You have to believe in the story. You have to immerse yourself in that world and drink the Kool-Aid and completely buy into it, because otherwise, I mean, you're doing make-believe every day. You have to enjoy it. You have to. And I know that from having done it a bunch of times now, what that takes from you personally, mentally, spiritually, from your family, your social life, it's a huge draw from all those things. So you can't be embittered by it in any way. So choosing the project is very important. You have to look at it, read the scripts, ask the right questions, try and find out if you might read a pilot. Then when you do the interview, you want to get a sense, okay, where does the story go? I've only read one script, but now I'm going to have to make a decision. Do I want to take this project that's going to have 10 episodes? I've only read the first episode. Or maybe I've read like a season outline, or like an outline of the season where I kind of get a sense of it. But then you're making that careful choice of like, what will this be for 7 months? Who else am I working with? That kind of thing. Because that's, now that I'm in that world of longer format, you basically go from one project to the next, which is another 7 months of your life, and you're constantly looking at every one of these things as a chunk of time that, I want to commit to this. I want to do this. I'm really interested in this world, in this story. And also being aware of like typecasting yourself and repeating, do I want to repeat myself? If I go do another sci-fi show, am I going to be doing The Expanse all over again? Sometimes that's a good thing. Maybe there's a different take on a sci-fi show that I would like to do, because I've learned so much about doing sci-fi that I want to try from a different angle. So I wouldn't say no to sci-fi again if it was the right project, So it's an interesting, it's an interesting place to be with. You have to be very meta about your own process, because you're everything is a consideration of a large timeline.
Yeah, and it's so interesting what you said about how, like, creatively, emotionally, spiritually, it's exhausting, right? It's all consuming because like a film set, the film set itself, but the prep before, it's like its own little, almost like Disney World. It's an own little land that doesn't seem like it's reality based, because it's not, to be honest. Quick question, who is in those meetings? Like, who picks you? Who says, he is the cinematographer we want?
It's often like a line producer, maybe a producing director.
Yeah.
Like a showrunner. It could be any one of those people that and there might be more than one interview. It could be like an interview with one of them first, and then you move on to like a week later another interview with more people and different kind of like power figures in that dynamic, all asking different questions. So it can be like Expanse was that for me. I ended up being like a couple of interviews before they offered me the job. So it totally varies from project to project.
Yeah. So you get booked on a project. Let's, for sanity's sake, say it's an episodic, like it's like, let's say it's The Expanse, for example. How does your creative process start? Like, how does it work? Like, day one, you're booked. Here's the script. How do you build this show?
It starts with the script, obviously. Read the script, making notes from the script of things that you have, that ideas that spark from reading it visually, or questions. Often it's a lot of questions, like, well, what is this? How does this thing work? And generally speaking, the production designer has usually started before the DP has. So the production designer has usually done some kind of either concept art or some base level like visual research that is available by the time I come on. That's usually available to me, so I can read the script and see, they've got whatever the hero set is, there's some concept art for it. There's maybe some character illustrations. It could be any one of those things. It's a good leap off point of like, okay, I look at these images, I read the script, and I can kind of start forming a world in my head a little bit. And then you take that to the next meeting, and the next time there's a page turn or whatever with the producing director, the showrunner, because usually at some point there's a tone meeting, there's a page turn, and you start discussing all of these things. You're looking at visual references from the concept art that the production designer has made, potentially like images from other movies or artwork, paintings. Like, it could be any of those things. You start discussing all that, and that's okay. What does our world look like? And if there's sort of rules, if you're starting, with Expanse, it was very much like we're science based. We want to treat zero gravity realistically. So everything was through the lens of how would this really happen? If someone's going to be in zero gravity and something has to fly across the room and bounce off a wall, or the ship has to tumble, what would really happen? And everything was through that lens. So the discussions of what we're going to shoot starts with the physics first. So, and every show has its set of rules. Usually there's some set of rules of like, in this scenario, we do it like this, or there's some kind of world rules. And Expanse had that for sure. And the more seasons we did, the better we got at it, and the more complicated it got, and the more intensive the discussions got. Because our meetings would often end up being, whiteboards with, it was like a NASA like launch planning thing where we've got like drawings on the whiteboard and like models, and we're holding things and like little figurines that were like, okay, this person would turn like that, and like then we draw it on the whiteboard and make notes, and then we start doing storyboards based on those notes of the physics. So it was very like rule based, but they were creative rules based on physics, and every show has their version of that.
This is gonna sound sappy. It makes me a little emotional hearing that, because there's not many places or careers in this world where there's such a collaborative creative process like that. I remember I was chatting with the costume designer for Murdoch Mysteries just like last week, and the same thing like overwhelmed me kind of, right? And like, I think when everyone is focused and excited and wanting to do their job really, really well, there's such a pride in craft that I don't think exists in a lot of places in the world. A lot of careers, I should say. And so when I hear that, and I'm such a addict for the behind the scenes footage as well too, because it is so incredible to see people, for example, the very first films that I was ever on as a background, deep background, was Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley. And
yep.
You couldn't see me. I'm in the deepest of the background. But I'm in full costume, including like period underwear, right? Like no one's gonna see that.
Sure.
But there's this pride in the craft, or like there was like stone carvings on this set that no one's gonna see. But the stonemason was like, yeah, right? There's just so many examples of that. And you're like, I just wish everyone wanted to be a fly on the wall in that room, right?
Yes.
Because there's such excitement and that pride. I guess is so cool.
No, I mean, for me, I'd never been a part of anything of that scale with The Expanse. And definitely, to what you just said, the show had an amazing retention rate as far as crew. Like from season 1 to season 6, I think it was about 80% of the team remained, which is unheard of. I think that's like 300 or 400 people that stayed together every season. We never knew if we were coming back every season because it was like, oh, are they renewing us or not? So it'd be months later that we didn't know, are we gonna have to go back? So people were constantly having to like juggle their plans or other jobs to like come back, but we always managed to like juggle to come back together, especially with like the construction teams, the props teams, costume, everyone worked together as a huge team on that show. And every year we were building on that collective knowledge of what we'd learned from previous seasons. So as things got more complicated and the timelines got tighter, we could work faster and more efficiently together because we had this base collective knowledge that we'd been gathering for years. So the construction department, like we all knew how to do our thing and then up it each time. But it was super collaborative because every department had to work together. Like if we're doing 0G, the costumes have to be built a certain way to work with the wire work. The props that they're holding have to work a certain way and look a certain way for the wire work to work or whatever's happening. The sets have to be built to be modular, to expand, to change, or be, shifted when we have to go to a certain gag or stunt sequence. Lighting department, they had to work so that the lighting worked. Like we all had to. The meetings we had were that's really what I think I learned the most from that show was from working with the same people like that for so long, and all of us having that shared knowledge together was how important it was to be collaborative. So every show I've done since then, when I've gone on to work with other teams that I don't have that knowledge with, I now make sure that it's right from the get-go that we have a discussion, we bring people together and say, hey, this is how I'd like to do it. Because you realize, and the showrunner, Narain Shankar, who was the showrunner of Expanse, the first season, I'd never done it. Like, I had no credits for a show of that size. And I know that they were probably looking at me going, like, who is this guy? But Terry McDonough, the producing director, he really wanted me. And I never worked with Terry, but he saw something in me and wanted me to do it. And Narain was great. He never let on. I know that he probably was thinking, oh my God, who is this guy? But he trusted me, and he said to me at one point in the first season, he said, because he's in LA a lot working on the scripts. He wasn't in Toronto. He was, but not all the time. And he said, just remember, you are the visual gatekeeper of the show. Like, you are the deputy kind of to me in the sense that, you have the power. As the DP, the lead DP of the show, you have the power. Don't forget, if something's not right or you see something that there's an issue on set with something, you can always call me. You can, basically instilling in me that he was putting that power in my hands and the responsibility. I never really thought of that role that way because I'd never been in that position. But then I took that to heart and I owned it for the rest of the seasons. That's my role, and I learned that, and that we kept working together and we really learned that. And so now when I go into a new show, I'm like, okay, I have to. This is my role. I have to basically make that same family collaborative thing happen on every show that I do, to make sure that we work together in that same way. And it generally, it works, but I had to learn it from doing that first.
With
well, we have it's with both. I mean, you need me? Oh, we're just getting helmets here. In the television world, like it basically is the showrunner and the writer's world. I mean, it starts from them because usually they're on before the director is. So you're doing you start the prep process with them, and then when the director comes on, then you start doing the location scouting process with the director. But you've usually the world has started to been built by the showrunner and the writers, and the director comes on, kind of buying into that process. It's not like a feature where the director it's their vision. It's that they're the kind of visual leader of the project. Yeah. In television, they still are, but the world has been set up by the showrunner and the writers, and the director is coming in to sort of like shepherd it through and to add their like put their fingerprint on it, bring their creative thing to it, but they're kind of working into a bigger machine that's already moving, So my job is to, if it's a show that I've been part of before, I'm there to kind of help the director assimilate into the show, but also to support their ideas, because they're going to come with fresh perspectives on the show while still staying in our wheelhouse of the world that we've made. But they often bring new takes on it, and that's why they're there. That's why they've been hired, because they have some fresh take that stays within the world. So our job in prep is to work together to kind of tease that new creative thing from that director who's bringing that to the table. And then we work together to go to the showrunner and the producers and say, hey, for this scene, we want to try this thing. We have this idea. And we kind of come at it as a team, And I see my job as like, I'm there to kind of facilitate for them to allow them to kind of come into this, because they're stepping into like a family of a machine that's already left the station, So I'm there to be like, okay, we come together, and it's like you have to bond with someone really quickly, because now you're going to be like you meet, and sometimes, especially on a TV series, you will meet a director you've never met before, and you've got like a week or two to like really get to know each other, because then you're going to be on the floor for like 2 or 3 weeks and under all the pressures that we have to be under and execute the ideas that we've had in prep. So you have to trust each other for one thing, and you have to build an instant rapport. And I want to be their ally, because you want to trust each other and have that sense of being allies, and be able to go to the showrunners and the producers and pitch your ideas and make sure that when we hit the floor, we're as in sync as possible, and we're going to be inspired together. And I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy the process of like working with a director and figuring out what makes them tick. Because some directors are more visual based, and they know their lenses, and they're all about that. And some directors are more performance and writing based. And you have to very quickly get a sense of like, what kind of director are they? And they can be a mix of both, or very extreme opposites. And you have to figure out, well, where do I fit in? Because I've worked with directors who were formerly DPs, and pretty successful ones who really have had amazing careers behind them. So then how do I fit into that? And you realize, okay, well, they are going to have more ownership of the camera and placement and lensing than I'm used to. So you have to then, okay, I have to relinquish some of that control, and you have to kind of get a sense of where is my place here. I'm partly a facilitator, and and then you have to kind of, it's an ego thing. You have to kind of like let your ego go, depending on because some directors might want to step more into your turf, what you think is your turf, and be okay with that, and understand, okay, my place is more with this particular director, and every time I work with someone, it's really helpful too, looking up their credits. Thankfully for IMDb, you can kind of get a sense of like, okay, this is the kind of work they've done. You kind of have a bit of a sense of the kind of work that they generally do. That doesn't necessarily tell you everything, but you get a sense of who they are enough that you kind of are a little bit mentally prepped for how to handle it, but you got to be open. You have to basically be open-minded to who this new collaborator is, and generally I've had very few negative experiences in that way when you approach it from that standpoint.
Yeah, it makes me think so much about like the scientific process as well too, right? Without, when you fail or you have somebody who is arguing with you, I shouldn't say that, debating with you or has a different opinion than you, to come at it with curiosity, like, that's interesting. All of this is in conclusion, make this better, right? Like that's the goal here for all of us, but can be really tricky, like you were saying, when egos get involved. Yes. And also I can imagine really tricky when there's a ton of money involved and a massive time crunch.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing too is, the people that you work with in prep and the personality, like they're not always the same person that you see on set. Like the pressures of set can change people, and you never really know fully until you get on the floor of the set and start like setting up. You don't really know someone's true personality. Sometimes you do, and most of the time your take on them in prep is accurate, but you have to prepare yourself of like pressure can change people. And you get into a tight bind and you can see another side of a person come out, which I understand. I mean, the pressure can be immense. And if you don't have that trust and you don't know each other, it can get difficult, you know? And that's when you have to like be extra diplomatic and kind of really try and be, you know, even keeled. Like I pride myself in maintaining that on set. Do not lose your cool. Don't yell at people. Don't snap, especially if you're dealing with a director who may change on you on the floor, you know. And it doesn't happen very often, and I don't want to paint the picture that that's what it is, but it does occasionally happen, and sometimes you just don't know. You just don't know until you're on the floor. So you have to prepare yourself for that. You have to be mentally able to handle that kind of like curveball if it happens. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing with episodic television is that we don't really get rehearsal time, generally speaking. And, you know, we're often dealing with there's two things. Either you're dealing with location work, a standing set, meaning a set that we've built that lasts for the whole season, like a hero, let's say a spaceship or a courtroom, in my case, some examples. And that you're going to keep going back to that throughout the season. Or it's a one-off set that's just for this episode and it's gone, you know. So in any of those scenarios, you work with the director and you try and in prep figure out the blocking. You look at the scenes, how are they going to fit into this set? But because we don't have rehearsal time, you very rarely know fully what it will be in that set until the time you go to shoot and the actors come to set and you start doing a blocking. Now, mind you, certain sets have limitations to them where the director will say them, like, to the actors and blocking, like, for this, I'd like if you can be here, you know, I need you to do this for this reason. And actors will understand if they're given the parameters of the set works this way, we've designed the shot to work like this, they'll get it. But of course, you have to allow the actor the freedom to vary that, because the thing with, the actors have come to the set with, they've read the script, they've done their own prep, they've had their own discussions with the writers and the actor or the directors. They may have other ideas when they come to set. And it quite often happens where even the director and I have figured out a whole thing of blocking. The actor comes, they come at it from a character standpoint, and they've got some different take on the scene that when they explain it, of why our blocking that we want to kind of suggest doesn't work, it's like, then you like, you know what? It's like, you can't argue with that. Like, that's right. Like that, for that reason, they're right. And we can't then say, no, you got to do it this way. So then you have to pivot and like rethink what you've planned, because the actor came at it with a different take on it, and they're not wrong. And that's the nature of the television game, where you don't have that time to work that stuff out beforehand. You don't know sometimes what that's going to be. So it's trying to be open to that and flexible with that, but as much as you can, try and be ahead of that so you minimize, because whenever that happens, it slows us down, because now you got to rethink, you got to change things a little bit, and you try and do it as quickly as possible. But if you knew what you're going to do and you stuck to the plan more or less, it would be a faster process. But it doesn't always work out that way because of the nature of television, of episodic work. So, given that, for me, it's always about, I want to see what the actors want to do with the blocking and really let them have the space, but also try and work the space in a way, the way we light it, the way we shoot it, that we're not, binding them into like a little box. If you have to hit this exact mark, you have to be here. Very rarely that there's, for certain technical reasons, they have to do that. But I don't think actors respond to that very well generally, because then they're self-conscious about it. They're aware of like, oh, I got to try and, it's kind of going against whatever their internal flow is of trying to do a certain thing. So we try and avoid that. But, usually any actors, most actors that I've worked with, if there's a reason to kind of adjust the blocking for some reason, it's all about creating that rapport with the cast. You want them to trust you, and we want to trust each other, and you're there to make them look good and make them feel supported and all that. So, I've always had success with do a blocking, we start working on it. I go to the whoever the cast member is, and I'm like, in this moment, would you be able to like just work yourself a little more this way because the camera's going to be here for this reason? I just give them the kind of reasons of how the shot's going to work. Generally speaking, they're totally okay with that. As long as there's a good reason and you can explain it creatively, that's our creative collaboration process, And then also there's the camera operator who works in with that too, because when in terms of the overall like process, we block, we do a private blocking, we do a crew blocking, where the whole crew is brought in. The stand-ins watch the private and the crew blocking, or just the crew blocking sometimes. But then the camera operator, I see as the camera operator, it's a huge part of that collaboration, which when I got on episodic television, I had to let that go because I was always my own operator. I did Steadicam. Whenever I did those things, I was the operator. So during the show, we would light the scene. When we comes time to shoot it, I was the one actually physically operating the camera. But in episodic television, you're usually going to have A and B or even C camera. There's too many things going on for the DP to also operate. So that's why we have operators. But they are now the extension of you. They are working, because when we start lighting and start working, the camera operator then takes over the set and starts working with the dolly grip and the stand-ins and starts to massage what we just saw in the blocking. And sometimes the blocking will change a little bit because once we start doing the physical work of getting the shot set up, the cast have gone back to their trailer. Sometimes they don't, but usually they've left to go rehearse or do something else. Now we're working for a while with the technical teams, with the stand-ins, and the camera operator's job is really important at that point because I'm usually too busy to be micromanaging all the little things of the camera. The good operators and the people that I work with, they become the kind of the choreographer of that stuff at that point, right? And it's a trust factor that I have with them, and the cast has a trust factor with them because they know that we work together. But the cast, when they come back to set, it will be the operator that will go to the cast and say, for this moment here, we have to move your mark a little bit, so you're going to be here just for this moment, just so you don't throw them. And they're like, okay, we're going to do a take, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm supposed to be here. But usually it's the operator that goes and tells the cast that. I might also get involved depending on what it is, but the cast looks to the operator to be that point person when it comes to the physical relationship of the camera. At that point, my job is more about light and helping them out with like, favor the light this way. Like that's where it gets really nuanced of like who says what at what point. So that kind of stuff, I'll step in and say, when you're here, like favor this side a bit more because the light really plays well. It looks great on you here. The operator will be the one who's more of like, when you come this way, can you banana around this table a little bit? And can you do this, please? And all the good casts will do it. And seasoned actors also will know the lensing that we're on, so they'll know the lensing and they'll be like, oh, what are we on? We're on a 32. Okay. They know, like, getting out of a chair, standing up, sitting down, quick movements and things. If the good not the good, but the experienced actors, the more experienced the actor is, the more they know that technical stuff. They understand the lensing. The longer the lens gets, they slow their movement down because they know the camera has to really jump around to find them. And that's kind of where you get a sense of an actor's experience level is their technical awareness and their continuity of like, will they do the same thing take to take? Because now the operator has to, every take, it's like, are they going to stand up the same way? Are they going to reach for the thing the same way? Are they going to, all those little things. The more seasoned actors that we've worked with are much better at the technical repeatability of, they're still doing their emoting thing. And that to me is the amazing part of the job is that they can be in character, totally emoting, delivering, like just acting the shit out of it sort of thing, but also technically mimicking what they've done take after take. That's a skill, especially when you're dealing with props, you have to pick up a thing, open the jar, take the thing out, all the meanwhile you're talking, you got to turn, look over here, then you got to do this. And ideally you're doing it all the same way every time for if you're doing coverage. So that's, and that's part of our jobs working together. Cause sometimes you work with the actors, say, oh, can you, like on the last take you did this. Are you going to do that again? Or because sometimes the actors might want to change it. Like, you know what? That didn't work. I'm going to try a different thing this time. Sometimes we don't know that. Sometimes they'll tell us. I mean, most of the time they will, but sometimes it's a choice in the moment. So it's a very important, that whole dynamic of like the DP, the operator, the cast. It's a very intricate relationship that we all kind of we have different roles and there's different, so I wouldn't even say etiquette's not the right word because there's no right or wrong way of anything, but every set has its own flow of how, and certain cast, some, and certain cast, you get to learn the relationship of different people's preferences, because some people, they're like, I don't want to mark, I want to mark, or can you, it really depends, and the more you work with a show's cast, the more you get to know what makes them feel comfortable and what they're amenable to, and all those things. It's a very dynamic relationship.
Yeah, and there's so many parts to it that I think we, especially as newer actors to the industry, and maybe just actors in general, kind of have that, I'm the center of this universe. And you're like, no, there's so many more things that are going on that are so important to this art. So how you answered this already, but I'd love to know if you have any more tips for how can we as actors make your job easier?
Well, I mean, there certainly are some courses out there. I know the CSC, for one, has done this. There are some acting for camera workshops that you can take, which I think are really helpful, and I've been a part of a couple of those. So for people who are very new, especially if, say, someone who's got more of a stage background, they've done a lot of stage acting, but they haven't done a lot of film and television acting, those are great courses because those courses teach you all the things I just said. It explains the relationships of who the focus puller is, who the operator is, how do you work with those people, the process of blocking. There's a specific way that we block for film, and then how do you do coverage, and what happens when we do coverage. We do the master, and then we do the over, and then the close-up, and all that stuff. Those courses are great because it gives you a chance to learn those things in a non-pressure environment with people who've done it, with crew. So you're going to have a focus puller, an operator, a DP, a director in these workshops. And I think those are a great learning tool. And all the feedback I've ever heard from those, from people who've taken them, is like, wow, that was such an amazing resource. But then there's just the just doing it. I think if actors who are maybe new to that and haven't had the luxury of getting into one of those workshops, I think it's just being open to tips from the crew. I mean, the crew is always there to help you. We're all there to make the cast feel comfortable and do a great job and feel supported. Everyone is there to help. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask, like, hey, should I do it like this? Does this help you if I do that? Like, if you're unsure of something, the operator, the focus puller, everyone there is there to help, and we'll be happy to do a little rehearsal. It's like, oh, can we just try that? And it's like anything tricky where it's like, I got to do something fast and I got to pull this thing up and like whip it into the shot. It's the camera operator will be happy to rehearse with you. So ask for a little rehearsal if you want to. It's everyone is there to help. And if you also like go look at the monitor, if you really want to know, like, you can ask and see, like, hey, can I just see what the stand-in is doing? Because they would have rehearsed it with the stand-in. You can have the stand-in do a run through for you and watch the shot. Like, the operator will do a little quick dry run and with the stand-in, like, oh, okay, I get it. I see what the camera's going to do now. So those are all options. No one's going to say no to you for that. So I think it's just keeping in mind that the crew is there to help you and to get whatever you need.
I think that's so fantastic to hear and important to hear, because I think we, especially as newer actors who usually are coming into something in an actor role, a little one-liner, not like you're saying, coming into what is a well-oiled machine.
Yes.
It can be really hard to feel like you can ask for something like that. You want to be, I'm happy to be here. I'm easy to work with, right?
Sure.
No problem. But I think, again, it probably comes down to, if I can rehearse this or see this and not, obviously not waste hours and hours of people's time on,
sure,
like, here's your coffee, sir. But all of it is to make this look better, faster.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying, like, these sort of little things you ask for, like, these are like quick things. Like, you just gotta hit the operator, like, hey, can you just show me, like, where are you on the first position again? Like, can I just see what happens in the number two? Like, where am I in relation to the number two? Like, whatever. Like, those aren't big asks. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
especially if it's a complicated move and you're not sure in a moment, like I'm a little lost here, like where's the camera in this moment? Because that's the other thing is being aware of where the camera is without actually looking at it, you know? It's a thing that I think that any actor who maybe is new to that world is being aware of the camera. That's a huge thing, because especially when you're in a scene with a other cast, is not getting blocked or stacked, as we call it. When the camera's shooting over somebody else and there's a couple other characters and you kind of end up kind of half behind someone, and sometimes some actors aren't really aware, and then the operators are struggling to kind of come around and find you. And or there's like, you're walking down a hall and it's like a walk and talk and there's like 3 or 4 actors and everyone has to kind of like find their moment as you walk down the hall. And oftentimes you'll see, and I see this sometimes with like younger actors, like child actors and who haven't had a lot of acting experience. They get so into the moment of it that they're not aware of the camera anymore, which is obviously that's the key. But you have to have some sense of the camera is generally here. So if I sense that there's somebody in my way, I have to kind of find my way around that person without making it look like I'm looking for the camera. But there's that awareness of like knowing, just to know when you're blocked, or know how to like just subtly lean a little bit. And it's all the great actors I've worked with are so amazing at that, and they do it in a way that you're not even like, they're doing it because we know they're doing it. But anyone watching that scene is not going to know they were like just subtly leaning like that just to kind of get into the shot.
Huh.
But it's a skill, and you can, if you're looking for it in anything, you'll see actors do it. But it's a skill that, like, it's a subtle thing that it can mean the difference between having to do another take or not. It's like, that was a great performance, but you were like half blocked in that one moment where we need to see you say that line. So it's like, it's that awareness of like, just where is the camera, and if I just adjust it, even things like with light, like if sometimes you have to say to an actor, when you're in this moment next to your castmate, you have to just shift a little this way so you're not shadowing that other person. And it's, or you're getting shadowed. It's like when you stand there, you're directly being shadowed, just come a little this way and just be aware of, and sometimes with all that's going on and there's a lot of lights on a set, sometimes an actor may not know, well, that light that's here is actually for you, or it's for that other actor. So when you're here, just make sure you come a little this way. However you land, when you do all this, when you're moving around and then you land here, make sure that you don't end up landing square in the shadow of this other person or a pillar or something. So it's just like, and I'll just say, like, I'll say this light here, that's for you. So when you're here, just make sure when you come here that you can kind of, you can see that light. If you can feel it, you're not shadowed, It's those little things. And again, like the seasoned actors, you can tell they already know that. You can see them when they land on the mark. They already kind of do this little thing because they know they're in shadow, or they can see they're shadowing the other actor. So those are other little things of just being aware of where your light is a little bit without being super obvious looking for it, but just knowing, it's that little subtle things that just make it makes the process more efficient, because you're likely not going to have to do another take. Now, we wouldn't necessarily do another take just because of that, because sometimes it's fine, but just to make it better, it's like, hey, do you want a shadow on your face? Probably not. So what if you just do this? You won't have that.
Can I think about it? It's so intricate, but it's so creative and exciting to think about that. It's terrifying because, as new actor, you kind of, somebody says action and you forget, like, what do I do with my hands, right? Let alone emoting and all that stuff. But
yeah, I totally.
Just like everything you've talked about, like building that foundation, it comes with experience. And, how else do you get experience? By being on set and asking smart people dumb questions like, can I look at the monitor? Even though it feels dumb to say out loud because you want to feel like you're the I don't know, there's this weird block, and we do it in medicine too, where I have so many questions, but I don't want to ask them because I don't want to look stupid. But in fact, if I don't ask them and my behavior reflects that, I look extremely stupid. Yeah. It's a very weird mindset that we have.
I mean, part of it is like reading the room. Because sometimes it's not the right time to ask a question. Like you have to read the room, because it's not always the right time to ask the question. But if you've made a good relationship with, say, the camera operator, and you have that ally, then you can almost always, that person's someone you can always go up and whisper to, and you're probably not, unless they're in the middle of something crazy setting it up, they're usually going to have the time to answer your question, unlike maybe the first AD or the DP or the director, who are maybe like super consumed with something at that moment.
Mhm.
But the operator, if they're not in the middle of doing something, they may have the moment to be like, because the A camera operator is kind of like the captain of the set in the sense, like they see everything, they know what every department is up to. They're looking at like 2 or 3 moves ahead with the chess game, so they're always a great resource to ask questions because they have that observational role where they're not necessarily completely consumed in that moment with some other task, like unless they're actually setting up the shot. But I see that happen all the time with the operators we work with, where they, they'll be working with the cast and they have that relationship, and the cast may come and say, hey, so what are we doing after this? Are we going to do the turnaround, you think, or when is the stunt happening? Like, if the actor hasn't picked up on all that information because they weren't part of that meeting or whatever, the operator often knows. So the operator is a really good ally in that sense.
Oh. A favorite funny or memorable time in your career, time on set?
I mean, I thought about this question before, and I was like, there's so many to pick from. I mean, certainly The Expanse has so many of them because it was 6 years of my life, and the core cast of that show are to this day friends, and were like family to us, and we certainly had many great moments together. I can think of the Baltimore shot that we did I got to make sure I get the season right. It's season 4, I think, if I'm correct. It's the Baltimore shot where we reveal Amos's character, played by Wes Chatham. We see him in Baltimore for the first time on Earth. He's gone back to Earth. It's the first time we've seen him on Earth. It's where he came from, and it's the big reveal of the Baltimore neighborhood, which we did as a huge shot, flying over the Toronto harbor into Regent Park, and we actually shot in Regent Park because some of those buildings look like the projects in Baltimore. So we had a helicopter, an actual helicopter with a camera flying into that neighborhood, and then we had a construction crane, 200-foot construction crane with another camera on it on a descender rig, where those two shots kind of like were going to be stitched together in post. So the ultimate effect is we're flying in, we're revealing Baltimore for the first time, we go over the building, we look down, we see the projects, we see all these people milling about, and the camera goes continuously right down, zeroes down to the ground, and we pick up Amos out of the crowd, and we go right into him, and then we follow him down the street a little bit. And that was probably one of the bigger things we've done. We had like 200 or 300 extras. We had the helicopter, we had the descender rig, and we literally shot them at the same time. So the helicopter would fly in, it would get to position, and we would cue the background, and then we would start the descender rig. Once the camera and the helicopter reached its mark, we had sent stills to the helicopter team of where the first position was of the crane camera, so they knew roughly where they had to get to. So they had a visual of like, we have to get to this frame. As soon as they were kind of in position, we start the descender rig. And it was a whole thing, and it was a great moment for all of us. Wes, getting to reveal Wes in that moment. So that was a pretty big moment for sure. I think about that shot sometimes. And you can find it online. There's plenty of examples. It's out there. It's there. You can find it.
Exactly what shot you're saying. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh, I know this one. But how? Like, it makes me want to ask, and this is such a did you ever think that this would be your life, right? Like, just being part of that, thinking like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, you've got all of this going on. Again, it must just feel surreal. Like, I know in my own experience, just being on a set, looking around, being like, how is this a real thing that I'm a part of right now? Like, what? That's incredible. It's pure art. It's a work of art.
I mean, I the whole saying of counting your blessings, I feel very fortunate to be doing the work that we do and the work that I do. I feel, there's good days and bad days. And even on the bad days, you remind yourself, like, I'm so lucky to be doing what I'm doing, because it's such a fickle business. It's so on the whim of things that you could be working one day and not the next and all that. So I'm constantly reminding myself of, like, I'm very lucky to be doing what I'm doing. I'm happy to be here. And in a weird way, it's like, it's what I imagined I was going to be doing when I was in high school. So in a way, it's like that was my dream job that I thought I would be doing, and the fact that I'm still doing it 30 years later, that says, okay, I'm still doing the thing that in high school I thought was my dream job that I could imagine myself doing. I'm actually doing it, and I'm still doing it. I mean, that's pretty lucky.
Oh yeah.
Well, I've started prep right now on the second season of a show that we did the first season of last year for Amazon. That the first season hasn't come out yet, but it's another example of a great bunch of people that I loved doing the first season with, and it's one of those things when they asked me to come back for the second season, I was like, yes, definitely. Like, same vibe of Expanse in terms of like the dynamic of how the show was put together creatively, the leadership, the collaborative spirit, the fun of it, all that. It's all there. So I'm looking forward to getting back to it and go to camera. We go to camera in a month and a half or so. So I'm really looking forward to that. It is like that. Someone actually said that the other day. It's like summer camp.
When I used to live in like res life in undergrad, right? College dorm, you like come back in September and you're like, yep, it is like camp.
Yes.
You get to hang out with all your friends, and then you don't really have a life outside of it.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you have any final? That's right. Yep, no life. And then but then it's funny. I always think about like there's this idea of reintegration, like back into society once it's over.
It is.
Like, summer camp's over. All right.
You got to kind of like get back to like civilian life, so to speak.
Yeah. You got to make your own food, and it's yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
You mean you're talking about from like an acting perspective in general? Because obviously this is our audience, right?
Sure. Or anything. I know it's such a loaded question to ask after an hour and 10 minutes.
I think it's just a matter of like persistence is everything. And I have huge respect for actors. I know how hard the job is. I know how hard it is to get the job and to keep doing the job. So all those things, like I know it's basically persistence. You got to just keep doing it. That's really, just don't give up. I mean, and I know that's easier said than done, but persistence is huge.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Jeremy, so much for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your incredible story, your knowledge, your energy, and your talents with us, with my listeners. And thank you for, just answering my stupid questions about cinematography and how this whole film and television industry world works. I so appreciate you. I hope you'll all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!